Welcome back to the Testing 1, 2, 3 podcast. As always, I'm Brett, joined by Lester. Lester, today, what are we talking about?
I'm talking about original sin.
Original sin.
Yeah, the original flavor, if you will. I heard it's fruit flavored. Who knows?
I now get why you were saying that. I did not realize that you were referencing the fruit of the garden. I'll let you have that one. I'll let you chuckle.
A guy who laughs at his own jokes.
Yeah. The only guy in the room laughing at his own joke. No. We're talking about original sin. We're talking about why it's important. And
what is it?
Yeah, what is it? And do people disagree with it?
Some do. People disagree with everything.
Okay, yeah. Do people who have a valid opinion disagree with it?
Sure.
Okay, there we go. That's all I need to know.
I mean, yeah, we can get into some weird territory. Anyway, let's get started with a definition of original sin that we'll work through a little bit here. Because it does get a little technical and a little complicated, but I think it's important that we work through it before we really get into the discussion. So original sin is the doctrine that teaches that all people are corrupted by Adam's sin through natural generation, by which, together with Adam's imputed condemnation, we all enter the world guilty before God. Bit complicated, but again, as we always do, we're going to break it down so that it's bite-sized and easy to understand. So,
bite-sized, eh? Good pun. How to bring it up. All right, continue.
So, original sin, basically, in the TLDR version, for those of you who don't know what TLDR is too long, didn't read, version essentially means that because of Adam and Eve's original sin in the Garden of Eden, all of us are born into the world with a corrupted and sinful nature. It's pretty much that simple. You and I enter the world, and in our nature, we are corrupted as sinners. And that means that we enter the world kind of separated from God in our nature. We don't have the original nature that God designed us to have.
Yeah, so it just brings in, if we think of the original story of how the original sin happened, of Adam and Eve garden, it's the concept of now people other than Adam and Eve, like their descendants, are no longer born into that perfect life that God desired, right? Like that's the idea is we no longer come into the world designed as God truly intended.
Yeah, totally. So what that means for us today is that, again, I'm going to get into some technical language, but again, I'm going to break it down, that all our human faculties are corrupted by sin so that we have an inborn tendency to commit sin. And moreover, our total depravity renders us spiritually unable to love God or believe his gospel and be saved until we are first regenerated by his sovereign grace. Okay, so it's a little bit complicated, but what that essentially means is that as a child, when you are born into this world, your nature being corrupted by sin means that you have the natural tendency to sin. It's not as though sin is something that is a learned behavior or something that you picked up along the way because of certain genetic faults. It's rather a spiritual corruption.
I mean, you could argue it's because of genetic fault. That's a really weird level of conversation of Adam. All right, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, it's more about the spiritual corruption of your tendencies in nature, and which causes you to sin. And this is inborn in all of us. And so if you take that to its logical end, then because of our nature and tendency to sin, we are unable to love God and be in relationship with God because we are sinful. Romans 3 obviously said, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. This is kind of a fundamental doctrine and something that we all agree to.
Yeah, I mean, you can't... We're going to get into this later on how the crucifixion is affected by this doctrine and majorly affected by this doctrine. But to your point, what you're saying is, if you don't believe that we don't have this innate way to sin, there's a better word there, innate tendency. I feel like there's a better inclination.
Sure.
Inclination to sin.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, it throws a lot of the rest of the doctrine of the Bible out, but it puts us in a place to know that, like, we are separated from God. This is a common, like, I mean, every church preaches this. This isn't like a disagreed upon thing. We are separated God because of sin. And all the original sin doctrine is saying is, this is what caused that chasm of sin. I mean, how many times have you been in Sunday school or something where they draw like you on one side, a big chasm, and then on the other, and then the cross guts us there. And like, hey, it's a very easy illustration for a kid to understand. But that chasm is in this doctrine created by original sin.
Exactly. Yes. And to compound this, of course, not only is there the tendency to sin, but actually you also sin. So not only do you have the inclination to sin, but you carry through with that inclination to sin. And I don't think any one of us. No, I don't not think. I know that every single one of us sins. We find this concept even in the Old Testament. In 1 Kings 8:46, Solomon says, "There is no one who does not sin." And that has held true for all of the Bible times, and it holds true to this very day.
All of the Bible times.
All of the Bible times. Every single one of the time in the Bible.
So you could also say all of history. But,
yes.
I love how you put it that way. And I think, that's the core message of Christianity is that we have sinned. I mean, you already used the Romans verse, but that's where this doctrine sprouts from. And I don't know if there's a great argument back to saying we're not sinful. Like, I don't even know. I mean, we'll get to it, and I'm giving us a highlight. But just think, like, if you're listening to this, just think, like, is there a good argument to say we're not sinful? Could you make the argument that we're not sinful? And I would say you probably can't. But hey.
So I think where we'll go from here, actually, if I'll throw you a little bit of a curveball, is I'll just highlight some of the arguments of the people that actually disagree with the doctrine of original sin.
You know what? I'm going to pause you. I'm not going to let you go there.
Sure.
I want to know why this is important.
Yeah. So actually, that's how I'm going to tell you this is important.
Okay.
Because I think it's easier to see why it's important when you see the disagreements. You'll see where I'm
decide that might stress it's not important.
Not important, and then we'll see why it's important. If that makes sense. That was a on-air production meeting, but it's okay. So I was reading and doing some research for this podcast, and I came across this article where a person wrote in to a theologian, and he's in seminary, and he says that he doesn't believe in the doctrine of original sin. And essentially I'm just going to read his letter here. It's not that long, and his position. So he says, the view, and the one I lean towards, is that people are not inherently evil. We are all good, but a corrupted sort of good. We make mistakes, we drop the atom bomb, we create Hitlers, but we aren't evil, although there are some pretty radically terrible people out there. This, of course, makes us wonder about Christ. Why did he die on the cross if we are already kind of good? The cross, then, is a call and recovery. A call for us to die and live again as the imago Christi, by which he means as the image of Christ. A recovery of truer and more real humanity. Following Christ is a deepening of our humanity the way God intended us to be in the garden. Which honestly,
sounds eloquent.
Yeah, kudos to him. It sounds great. Yeah. Sounds elegant. Is eloquent and elegant. I think it's an elegant sounding argument.
Are you just defending your word slip?
Maybe. Yeah. Are you stop trying to blow up my spot? Okay, maybe that's what I was saying. But yet, I think it's quite eloquent. But I think that his thinking is a little bit flawed.
Yeah, I mean, and we've talked about this, but I just think perspective is a big problem with this idea. So what perspective? I don't like the words good versus evil, because I mean, anybody, like any person in the world will use that term of bad versus good or good versus evil, right? But I mean, even non-Christians believe in good versus evil. Like there's a morality to that, like to everyone, right? Where they get that morality from, I mean, that's a whole nother podcast, and why they believe in that morality, another podcast. But I don't like that's how he started it, because from a viewpoint of a human, you could say people are good, but who are we viewing this from?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And I think even from the humanistic standpoint, I think there are, I would say, 4 reasons why his argument isn't perhaps something that is solid.
Okay.
So I see 4 reasons to doubt his argument. So the first is that the doctrine of original sin, as we laid it out. Adam sins, and so he brings sin into the world, and all of his offspring are corrupted with that sinful nature. He's right. It's his argument earlier, and I didn't read this portion of his letter, but he's right that it's actually not explicitly taught in the Bible. There isn't like anywhere in the Bible that says, and this is original sin, here is how it works, and you're all sinful because of Adam's sin. It doesn't say that explicitly. The closest we get, of course, is Romans 5, where it's implicitly implied.
I mean, I would argue we get close all throughout the Bible. It's never referred to as the original sin, like this big, like Moses is never like, and we are here because of the original sin. But it's not like they deny Adam's sin, and often it's referenced. Like Adam's sin in the garden is caused us to be here because of Adam's failure. Like it's not like it's scared away from. It's talked about. It's just okay. It's not given the term the original sin.
Just like the doctrine of the Trinity.
Yeah.
The doctrine of original sin is something that we see throughout the Bible. So, problems with this argument. First, original sin, the doctrine of original sin, gives hope to the sinner. Let me explain what I mean by that. If we all understand ourselves as sinners, equally as sinners, then we have hope in Christ. However, if Christ's death on the cross, as he says, is simply a call to, quote unquote, essentially what he's saying is be better, right?
It kind of sounds like he's saying it's supposed to be like an inspiring event.
Yeah, like he dies on the cross, and so now we are inspired
Does
to
he
a
say
deeper...
just dies on the cross? Does he say resurrected?
He isn't explicit about that. He just says the cross of Christ.
Okay. I would assume he somewhat believes that Jesus rose from the dead.
Yes, because he does say a call for us to die and live again.
But I mean, from his point of view, you could argue that he would only have to believe Jesus died and didn't rise again. Because
because it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It's just a good event that we can be inspired by.
Yeah, it's a call to live in the image of Christ and a recovery of a truer, more real humanity, which I think essentially boils down to 2 words: be better.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And
like he's saying be better. Yeah, not that I agree with that. That's what the message of the cross is. But
no, it's not.
Yeah.
But he is saying essentially be better. And I think that is not what the cross is. The cross...
I don't think you have to say think. I think we know that's not what the cross is.
Because that gives me no hope. As a sinner, like, how am I supposed to just simply be better? What changed? Nothing changed in my nature. Nothing changed spiritually for me. I didn't come to life again. So I'm just supposed to make a decision or make the correct decision in every given situation in my life.
How does he rectify it with like other teachings in the Bible? Like where does he? We don't know.
No, that's all he's got.
Yeah, it's just interesting because, I mean, like other prophets speak of our damnation all throughout the Old Testament. Paul speaks of our damnation all throughout the New Testament. I just wonder how he would reconcile that event, like Jesus dying on the cross, with what other people say, because it's not like the Gospels are the only place where we learn that we are fallen short of the glory of God. Like, that's common throughout the Bible.
It is.
Read which, and I mean, I suggest in these books, they're tough to get through, but read Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. All that is people messing up for like a solid 4 books and being separated from God and God being angry at them, and Moses being like the middleman. That's all that is.
Well, I mean, it's rife throughout the Bible.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. But I'm just saying, I don't know how he would
yeah.
rectify this viewpoint with like just the rest of the stories of the Bible.
Yeah. So like on the surface, it sounds like really encouraging, right? Like, oh, you can do it. You can be better. Like, oh, you know, it's a truer, more deeper humanity. And on the surface, that feels nice. But if you take it a step further, it always ends up being like, okay, but am I doing it? Am I doing it? And
how do I do it?
Exactly.
What do I do in order to be doing it?
I could make 99 correct decisions, and that 100th decision is the wrong one, and I've ruined all of it. Like, everything is ruined.
Yeah. I think it takes away the hope of the cross, and then it puts so much pressure on the individual as like, hey, by the way, the cross really wasn't what it was, and now you have to be right. Yeah. Like, you just have to be right all the time.
Every single time.
Yeah.
For the rest of your life, don't make mistakes.
I mean, he's not explicitly saying that, but that's what his theory implies.
Yeah, because that's the extreme logical end of your...
Yeah, of his argument.
Yeah.
But it just, that'd be an awful way to live. I can't really imagine going through life being like...
That's so... it's actually discouraging.
If I get the chocolate ice cream, am I sinning?
You're sinning. You've sinned. But
I really want the chocolate. And people are looking at you like, you're insane, man. Get the ice cream. No, obviously that's a joke, like a stupid little decision. But I don't know how he... Like, I just don't know where he gets that from. Now, I would ask you, Lester, we're attacking one paper written by one guy. Is this a common viewpoint that aside disagreeing with the original sin would hold?
Yes. So it's actually his theology actually has a term. It's called Pelagianism.
Okay.
And you know, supposedly, and this is if you are of the Pelagianistic view, you would say that the good news of the gospel is that at every moment you are free to obey God.
How's that any different than?
But the converse of that is, yes, so they would say at every moment you have you are free to obey God, and you have the ability to obey God apart from
apart from God.
Yeah. So it's weird, but like Christ's death on the cross is your reminder to do so. He is ultimately the most obedient, and so you are to follow in his footsteps.
I see.
But the bad news, the converse side of that, is that while you are free at every moment, you are also free at every moment to sin. Like,
you're equally free to not follow him.
The choice is still right there. And our nature, if you follow original sin, the doctrine of original sin, is to sin.
Yeah, but in his point, he's saying, well, we're naturally good. So therefore, most of our decisions will be good. Notice I'm using words good and evil, not righteous and not righteous. Yeah. And therefore, we would just have to make good decisions, which we naturally will do. And God is just a reminder of how we do that. I mean, I don't like this viewpoint because I just think it discounts like pretty much the whole Bible in it. But that's how I'd probably sum that up.
But again, are you going to make every single right decision?
No, you're not.
In a row.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he goes on to argue that in the article. No. But that's where you would take to his logical end and be like, okay, if you believe that means you have to make every decision right for the rest of your life. It also, and we're kind of flirting of why original sin's important right now. We've never we haven't explicitly said it, but let's just go there.
Yeah.
It's important because, like any story you read, any book, there's always an action that causes our hero to go on a journey, right? Like, just think of here's a movie almost everyone's seen, The Princess Bride.
Yes.
What's the original action that causes our guy to go on his journey is the buttercup gets taken away from him, right? I can't believe I know that movie so well, but it's honestly a classic. But every story, everything has an original problem that then our hero has to solve. Yeah. But now if you take that out, all the actions of the hero or all the actions of the story don't make sense because what is he working towards? Well, original sin is that. That is the truth for humanity.
Yeah.
If you believe in the doctrine of original sin, which we're giving it a title, really what we're saying is if you believe Adam sinned.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying. We're not saying it's like this like written doctrine. It's just if you believe Adam sinned and then therefore we are sinful, then the whole rest of the Bible is important because it's the redemption of the human. But if you don't, I don't know how you quantify where that rest of the Bible fits in your life, because why do you care about the Israelites being taken from Egypt? Well,
doesn't matter.
If no one's born with original sin, like, why does God, like, all the actions would just make random and no sense. And God is not nonsensical and random.
Yes.
It might seem random. I mean, you could argue that, sometimes it seems random to us. But God is not nonsensical. He doesn't do things just because, like, oh, lightning bolt Zeus. Like, he's not, you know what I mean? Like, that's how people viewed gods. Like, it just cheapens the rest. And then when you get to the crucifixion, why is it important? Because the crucifixion is there to solve the problem. That's the hero winning the story. Yeah. So that's like why when we get into this, I mean, that's a pretty simple, quick way to talk about it. But Lester's going to expand more. But like, I don't know how you view the rest of the Bible and rest of Christianity without original sin.
It absolutely, you're right. Original sin highlights to us the need for the cross. And I mean, we were going to wrap up with this, but it doesn't matter. Without original sin, you diminish what happens on the cross. Mm-hmm. You diminish the apex, or like the what's that word? I forget now. The apex of the story, the climax of, oh my goodness, words. The climax of the gospel narrative.
Yeah.
Right? Because now it becomes just this.
Well, it just becomes a cool thing somebody did.
Yeah. Oh, it's an example. Nice. Cool.
Also, it doesn't make sense why he would rise from the dead, because you wouldn't need God to come down to earth just to show us that you can die for what's right.
Yeah.
Because that's what he's saying. He's saying just die for what's right. But like, God died for not what's right on earth, but what's right in his point of view. So I want to go back to two things I touched on and I never actually expanded on. I talked about the viewpoint, the difference between what an article like this would have. They're viewing from good and evil, and I think that's not the best way to view humanity. I think we should view it more as in righteous and non-righteous. And I know you want to expand on this because we had this conversation.
Yeah, so I think that ultimately what's important is not so much our human moralistic arguments of, oh, this is good, this is bad. But what's more important and ultimately what is eternal is what is righteous and what is unrighteous. Mm-hmm. And you're standing before God. And so when you look at it from a even more bigger scope or bigger picture, God is not...
or try to look at it from God's perspective.
Exactly. Yeah. If you try to look at it from God's perspective, God is not concerned about like your tiny little actions on an individual. Like, yes, he is, but ultimately it's you're standing before him in terms of your salvation.
I'll
take that back. I take that back.
He is concerned. I think you're trying to say the opposite viewpoint holds a very micro view of actions. Like, is that a good action? Is that a bad action? Is that a good action? Whereas the original sin doctrine would hold a more macro view of where is your standing with God? Yeah. Not that he doesn't care about you kind of got caught on your words there. Not that he doesn't care about what you do, but are you righteous with him? Are you right with God? Are you acting in good faith towards him and trying to live out through him? Like that's where the viewpoint changes. And when you change that viewpoint, now you're not looking as humans as good and bad through our lens, because then you don't classify people as Hitler or not Hitler, right? Like, and most humans would agree that's wrong. But how would God look at that situation through righteous and not righteous? I'm going to say God does not think Hitler's righteous. That's not the point. I'm saying, but when you view it from God, you go, hey, this is right with God. This is wrong with God. Then actions don't become about like, oh, who I am and what I did. Yeah. It's just my relationship to God. Where am I in relation to God? And then it's not like, it doesn't become this like, well, I'm a good person, I do good things. Yeah. It's like, that's not what we're saying. Like, we can get into intentions and stuff like that, but we're saying, where are you in relation with God? That's the point of this.
Yeah, what I mean by the tediousness of your actions, God is not concerned with the tediousness of your actions. God is not a legalistic God, right? I mean, Jesus himself condemns the legalism of the Pharisees and Sadducees and scribes, right? God is not concerned, like, they would make these laws that were just ridiculously complicated so that they would not break the original laws.
They would do it so they wouldn't break his law.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But God is not, the actions is not what God was concerned about. God was concerned about the heart and the intention to obey him. And so on a more macro level, that's what's important. It's whether or not we are righteous, and righteousness is only through Christ. There is no other way to attain or achieve or earn righteousness. Righteousness comes through Christ. And so you're right. Original sin, the doctrine of original sin, first of all, emphasizes what happens on the cross. Second of all, gives us hope, because now it's not every single decision that you make that is critical. And my next point is that original sin puts us all on the same level before God. You know, in this Pelagianistic argument, some people are inherently better, some people are Hitler.
Yeah, I guess, you'd be like, well, this person is, it would be an uneven playing field.
Exactly.
Like, well, that person is just a really good person, so they're just ahead of me for some weird, spiritually, I don't know, misguided reason.
Yeah, like now some people are better than others, and like there's like this unequalness.
Well, we should say it's better than others before God. It puts on like a hierarchy in how God views each human. Like there's all of a sudden this like list, and like, you know, Lester's here, I'm a little bit below him, but Anthony's just like a couple steps above me. You know what I mean? Like that's what it becomes. Like, wait, what is that?
Yeah, well, that's the world. Super weird. Yeah. And the doctrine of original sin puts us all in the same humbling
For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God.
That's what it says.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's very important to remember, and it helps us gain perspective on who we are before God. The doctrine of sin, original sin, helps us understand who we are before God. This is fourth. Original sin gives us the tools to respect others. So what I mean by that is, because we understand that we all have sinned, right? I have sinned, you have sinned. When I preach the gospel to somebody who doesn't know Jesus Christ, right? I am not coming from this moralistic high ground of, I have attained more than you. I am further along I have a truer humanity than you do, right? No.
How you put on like the,
no, I have sinned, you have sinned.
Yeah,
we're
all
equal. Need Christ. And so it gives us that respect for others. Like we are in the same standing.
Yeah, and I've said this on like, I don't know how many podcasts now, and I'll have to say it on every other one. It just puts us in a higher position than we should be. Original sin puts us in our place. That doctrine puts us in like, we're not as bad. We're pretty good. Like we're good. We're doing good.
We're okay. We're all right.
And it makes Christianity more about us and less about him. And that is the exact opposite. Christianity is all about him and less about us.
Yes.
And when we do that, again, it becomes about our actions. And how many Christianity adjacent podcasts we had where we talk about religions that only focus on your actions? And every time we come, that's not what God's about. Yes, he wants you to act good. We're not saying go and do whatever you want because you believe in God. Your heart should be right with him, and then you'd act according to him. And Paul talks about, hating sin and following love with the ways of Jesus. But that's not a do this, like you touched on with the Pharisees. Their whole idea was like, God told them they couldn't enter one room, so they just locked the house and said no one can even go near the house. It's like, and God's like, that's not the intent. It's not that I don't want you entering the room. It's I want your heart to love me so you don't enter that room. Yes. Not that you just like, I can't do anything, so I'll just wrap up my life. And it becomes more and more about us and more about our actions. And then what happens is people take this and they start coming up with a game plan. Don't do this, do this, don't do this, do this. Don't do. It becomes just another religion that's like, can't do this and can't do that. And that's not what Jesus came for. That is like the opposite of why Jesus is here.
Exactly.
So that's why when I hear things like this, I just get concerned because it's like, you're missing the main point of the Bible,
Yeah, and actually that's a perfect lead into my final point. And you basically touched on this earlier, but original sin explains the need for Christ's death on the cross.
Yeah.
Right? Because why would we need Christ's death on the cross if nothing really was wrong in the first place?
Well, we wouldn't.
Yeah,
We wouldn't.
you don't.
Yeah.
Christ would simply have to come. Let's even grant that Christ has to come. Okay? Christ would simply have to come, live the life that you were supposed to live, like just behave.
Well, you'd have to live a perfect life, and then he could just leave.
Yeah, and then he would just ascend, and it's okay. It's all good. Why does he have to die? For what? He just needs to set an example for whatever they think is a good life, or the correct way to live, and then he goes, and that's that.
Yeah, and I want to. I mean, I don't think is there anything else to add to that. I don't have anything else to add. I just think we're not attacking this one paper. This paper was a good representation of what people who don't believe in original sin would say, right? Who don't believe in the doctrine of original sin. That's all it is. Now we are attacking it because we think it's wrong.
Yeah.
But I just think whenever you read something like this, they can sound like really. I mean, they use big words. I mean, he throws in the Latin for
Imago Christi.
Yeah, it's like, dude, you could have just said God with us. Like,
no, it's the image of Christ.
Image of Christ. Sorry, yeah, image of Christ. Like you didn't need to go, but it makes it sound like, like,
he's so smart.
I researched this and it's so smart, and this is. And honestly, if you're not reading, like, I'm not telling people how to read. This is not my point. My point is, I get caught. I'll read something. I'll be like, man, that sounded really good. And I don't even put any more thought into it. And then I walk away and I start thinking, and then someone will challenge me. I'll come, well, me and Leslie will talk, and be like, wait, what was that paper really saying? What was that book really trying to prove? And then you realize, like, wait, that's the kind of, and it's hard to detect these sometimes. Sometimes you're just like, oh, that sounds, he's in seminary. He's done more work than I have. I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe that's good. But then you start, like, it leads down dangerous paths when we get involved with ideas like this. So I just hope this podcast, like, kind of said, like, hey, it's okay to just believe the Bible, like, for what it says, because that's really important for us.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I there's something that I just thought about, and I wanted to make sure that we included this. I think personally, I feel like if you don't believe in the doctrine of the original sin, that, like, it almost diminishes the depth of God's love for me when we don't have.
No, it does. Yeah, not almost. It 100% does. If we didn't need to die for us, then it's just like a weird action taken by God.
Yeah. And when you understand Christ's death on the cross as the substitution, his substitution for my sin, like, he's taking the penalty that is rightly mine, I think that gives me the proper perspective for how deep the Father's love for us is.
Quotes. Quotes. Are you going to finish the song? Or?
Yeah. It just makes me understand how far I fell.
Yeah.
And how far he came to bring me back.
It puts us in the right mindset to know how far away from God we are and how much we need him. And then also in the right mindset to realize how thankful we can be for what he's done.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
Let's say that.
Absolutely.
Let's wrap it up there.
Yeah.
Because we're going to be back next week. We're talking about an idea that kind of works with this.
Yeah.
Talking about the Holy Spirit next week.
Holy Spirit.
Holy Spirit. So we'll see you guys next week. Want to thank, I won't say who it was, but this whole topic came from a write-in question. Someone wrote in a question and just kind of mentioned that we hadn't really touched on original sin. Not that me and Lester were talking against it. We just kind of assumed it in our argument. And so when we read the email, we're like, hey, let's touch on that. That's a great topic that we should touch on. So want to thank the writer on that one who wrote in. And
great question.
Anybody else to write in, testing123@springvale.org. Write in. I'm not promising you that your question will be a podcast. We're probably never going to use names unless you specify, like, I want people to know this is me asking the question.
Now that you say it that way, nobody's ever going to.
Yeah. I just think, like, there's strength in, anonymity is fine. It doesn't need to be like, hey, how's Barb from, because most people listening to this are going to Springvale Church. And so feel free to ask a question, and it's not going to get, like, people, if you're like, I don't want people to know that I'm asking this question. Well, There's only 2 people reading it, so
Yeah.
you'll be fine. And we're not going to use names or anything like this. Unless you say, I need people to know I'm asking this question, then hey, like, I guess we'll do that. Even then, we might not even use the name. But yeah, let us know. But thank you for writing in, and thank you for listening, guys. We will be back next week.
Awesome.